We are back on, getting ready for our next panel for the Black and Media Day Summit. I hope everybody's doing good. We've had some great chat so far today, and I'm really excited about the one that we are going to be having today. Or not, well, it's clearly today, but for the session that's about to happen shortly. My name is, for those that don't know, my name is Treye Green, and I am the founder of Black and Media. Black and Media, I founded it last summer during the whole media reckoning and this moment where for some, after Black folk and Black people and Black journalists and all the other additional people that are in the Black media community have been saying forever that we were facing issues of racism, systemic racism, microaggressions, issues as far as our career advancement, blocks, gaslighting, all of these things. Last summer, everything kind of just became this huge moment where for a little bit of time, our stories were the trending topic, and this whole focus on our trauma, but not necessarily realizing that these issues and these problems have been existing. They've always mattered. They matter to us. We've tried to raise our voices. We've tried to be heard, and we weren't listened to until they were this trending moment. And I realized at that time in June, I was like, we've seen this happen before. We will not have these Black bylines inundating these outlets, these outlets with large reach, these outlets that oftentimes haven't covered our centered Black stories, our stories that center Black folk. I realized that this is not going to last long. And with that in mind, I wanted to, one, create a place where we could celebrate the work that we do as Black media professionals all the time, because we do it anyway. And we could have our own space and our own place and let it be known that we're not waiting to be seen. We're not having to beg to be seen by anybody. Being in our stories being on the homepage or being covered in the A block or B block of a TV show in no way takes away from the value that we already knew we held, even before we were on those larger platforms. So I wanted a place where we could just celebrate the work that we do, and we've been known we were doing, and we've been known we were great. And I also wanted to have a place to. I think that our trauma is a piece that's a part of our story. That's in a lot of cases what motivates us to want better, to protect the other Black media professionals around us. That's honestly why I started Black in Media. I wanted to offer resources and tools to other Black media professionals coming up that may have questions and don't know where to go with them, and don't necessarily feel safe asking them or don't know who to ask. But outside of our traumas, I was like, we have fun. We're cute. We look good. We are more than these tough moments and the microaggressions. And today in Black and Media as a whole, I tell people is, my idea for today was I wanted a space that was Black trauma absent, free of Black trauma, and Black triumph abundant. I want us to talk about what we do well. I want us to rally around and celebrate and feel good about and empower and uplift the things that we create even through these tough times. So that's a little bit of an idea of kind of how I came up with the idea for Black and Media. The Black and Media Day Summit, Black and Media Day clearly is today. It's also Ida B. Wells' birthday, the legendary investigative journalist. And I was inspired to do Black and Media Day on July 16th to also commemorate her birthday. But yeah, last year was the first year we did Black and Media Day. I said, for sure, we're doing it again. This is an annual thing. But I also wanted to create another form of a professional development outlet, in a sense, and a place for us to kind of hear from our own folk that are doing the things that we already are doing or we may want to do. I think it's very important to visualize and see Black folk in places that you want to be, because that lets you know, even if you know you can do it, that just reinforces the idea that you can do it. So me and then our Black and Media's experiential coordinating manager, and she's going to come in a little bit. We came up with the idea of the Black and Media Day Summit. We have worked to pull together all of these wonderful panelists and really put shape to this idea. And I have been very excited just to see how it turned out. Lots of great feedback from everyone, and we're just glad that you're here. And I will add that a lot of times when people hear Black media professionals, they just think of journalists. And Black in media is for the entire scope of Black media professionals. Black media professionals, to me, I see it as very general. Do you create some form of media? Are you in some way in your career attached to some form of media? So that's graphic designers, that's publicists that keep people's names in the news and out of the news too. Like advertising, marketing, podcasting. Are you an influencer? You know, all Black people that create in some way, because there's so many forms and so many outlets that we use for media now. So yeah, you are in the right place, no matter what area of media you fall in. And it's not just for journalists, it's for all of us that fall underneath that umbrella of being a Black media professional. So yes, I'm gonna open the floor. I'm gonna throw everybody on the panel today. Their information is gonna be underneath the main screen. I'm gonna throw all their contact information there so you can reach out, follow them. I have a professional development agency, and I'm doing free consultations for people that are part of the event today, the summit. So that link should be pinned at the top. So if you fill out that form and you're interested in a career consultation, to take the information you learned today, and we can kind of parse it, talk through, like, where do you see yourself? What do you want to do? Please, please, please feel free to sign up for one of those conversations. And it's a one-on-one chat. And that's just something I wanted to do to kind of push forward what we built today. And then finally, for Black in Media Day, if you don't have the graphics, I'm about to send an email out, but if you don't have like the graphics to share on your social media and everything for the day today, just drop a line or email me or reach out in some way and we'll get those to you. So yes, those are all of my points. I am very excited to introduce Brianna. Brianna is going to introduce Keisha, who she is going to be moderating this podcasting panel. So yeah, get ready for an amazing chat today. And also the panels are going to be recorded. So don't feel like you got to we are not back in high school, undergrad. You don't have to take no notes, rest your fingers, and just listen. And we'll make sure that you can rewatch this once we post the recording. So I'm going to throw it to Brianna so that she can introduce Keisha. And again, Brianna is our experiential programming manager, and she helped plan and kind of coordinate everything with the summit today. All right. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, okay. Hi. There we go.
Hey, hi, Brianna.
Thanks for joining us today. So Keisha is an audio producer and executive producer at Spoke Media, and she will be moderating a conversation today. We thought it would be better to have an actual podcast producer / former host moderate the conversation. So I'll have Trey bring in everyone and go ahead and get started. But just a note, put in your questions in the Q&A boxes, and we will try to get to them towards the end of the panel. You can go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Brianna. Thank you, Trey. And look at all these beautiful Black faces. Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Oh, y'all look good. Y'all look good. I see we all got a little pressed powder on today. I'm living for it. Welcome to the Breaking Into Podcasting panel. We're just going to have a conversation. And before we jump into the convo, I just want to introduce you to all of our panelists. I'm just going to go around my screen here. Shout out to, I just do it. We out here in the streets. Shout out to Agi up here on my upper left. Agi is a senior managing producer at Pineapple Street Studios. A lot of the work she focuses on is around arts and culture, intentionally centering Black voices and audiences. And some of the shows, I'm just gonna toot for you here. Some of the shows she's worked on was Another Round, Okay Now Listen, and Lovecraft Country Radio. Also 18 Emmy noms. Hello, hi. So if you want to unpack that show, go listen to that podcast. Shout out to Josh Gwynn, who is on my lower left of the screen, senior producer and host at Pineapple Street Studios, created work for New York Times, Netflix, Essence, Stitcher, Nike, and others, and currently the co-host of Back Issue, which the New York Times called a balm in trying times. Listen, when have we not have trying times though? I'm just saying. Back Issue was also called one of the top 10 podcasts of 2020 by Times Magazine, and was in the top 15 podcasts of 2020 by The Atlantic Magazine. And Josh's vibes are palm trees, confetti, limes, rhythm, vitamin E oil, melanin, and bones. Yes. I want to, at some point, we got to talk about the bones. And I would love to also say hello to my newest friend, Savoy Jefferson, to my top right on my screen, the creator of the Eat, Pray, Thought podcast, 3 activities I enjoy doing. It is an interview series that highlights Black creatives with a focus on queer and trans folks. And in each episode, Savoy and his co-host, Amber Watson, asks the questions of their guests about food, passion, sex, relationships, to create a show that is joyfully ignorant as well as inspirational, which is absolutely up my alley. And when Savoy is not doing the show, he's doing Savoy Jefferson PR. Hello, hi, Black media professional. Okay, we need to discuss. I need services. And I am Keisha TK Dutes. I'm an audio producer, longtime host, talent. I mean, basically, you pay me, I show up, let's do it. I was producing BuzzFeed's Thirst Aid Kit at a time, Function with Anil Dash, Here to Slay, most recently Good Words with Kirk Franklin, did a lot of my own stuff. We could talk about all of our own stuff and how that fits into the landscape later. But what we all have in common is that our careers center Black voices, stories, and joy. So I want to ask my family to come off mute. Woo, because that was a mouthful.
You did great, TK. That was
amazing.
Great.
Thank you, family.
You did what? That.
Listen,
exactly.
I just want to start here because we all have an origin story, and that I feel like always sets us up for the future. And every job we do, every gig we have builds off the other thing. So what was your first pod or audio gig, and how did it prepare you for where you are now? Anyone can go.
I can jump in. So I know like we've been way like out of university for a minute, but like it does kind of start in college for me. I did not major in journalism. We didn't have an audio program. This was way before podcasting became something you could get paid for. But I did do a lot of student media, and in that space, I focused a lot on like strategizing on basically how to leverage legacy media in the digital space. And TK, what you just said about how our, experiences build on each other. When I got an internship at NPR as a social media intern right out of college, that literally became my job that I got to be paid for there. And like halfway through the internship, I connected to a Black producer who worked there. And in my actual internship, I wasn't doing any editing of audio, but this amazing Black woman there, she took me under her wing and literally like send me raw audio files that she had worked on, and like would send them to me. I would try my best to make it sound like something, send it back to her, she'd give me notes. And we did that back and forth for like 2 months, like literally like in the after hours of that internship. And there's like a lot of details that go into that, but pretty much like that amazing Black woman ended up being the reason why I got my first job at an actual show at NPR, being a producer, editing audio, booking, writing scripts, and the show she got me on was hosted and EP'd by Black women. And so literally like my start, I would not be here if it were not for the Black women that advocated for me, even when I had like very little experience, but like saw my potential and knew that like seeds were worth being planted there. And so, yeah, like that snowballed into like eventually getting into podcasting, but that was how I got in at first, was just having an amazing mentor, as well as like being willing to kind of do that extra work. And so, yeah, that was me.
We love it. A lift as we climb moment, yo. I see your mic just came on, Josh.
Well, for me, I knew what podcasting was. Like, I knew what that space was, but I always thought it wasn't for me. I always thought it was for like white dudes who talk about like business to business marketing or something. Like, I did not know that there were space for me, really, until I heard the read the first time. And then I was like, oh, okay, there's people that talk like me. There's people that have the same interests as me. There's people that are talking about things that are relevant to like what my lived experience is. And so I was in grad school at the New School in New York, and they have like this listeners lesson or listener letter section of the show. And I reached out to them because I had a work study on campus where I had access to this huge auditorium. And I was like, I want to throw their live show. And so I just like reached out and was like, hey, do you mind if I throw your live show? And I threw the second and third anniversary shows. And they sold out. And that was when I was like, oh, wait, hold up. Like, there's like money in this industry. Like, there are jobs in this industry. Like, I could make a life here. And so I did my master's program in media management and did my capstone in audio media, graduated, and just started making stuff. And one of the guests that was on the show that I was doing, that I've since scrubbed from the internet, was an old college friend, and she was going to be on a show at Pineapple Street. And I had been a really big fan of the work of Pineapple Street and Jenna Weiss Berman because I loved Another Round. And she was like, have you heard of this place? And I was like, if you don't hand someone my resume, like, I would never talk to you again. So she handed my resume and I started interning. And that's when I got my first audio gig, I guess.
Like literally get in where you fit in.
Literally.
Okay. Because we're going to discuss all of these models. Yes. Savoy, what you got for us, friend?
Wow. So my origin story is completely different. So I basically worked in entertainment PR pretty much my whole career. And around 2016, I kind of decided I had something to say. I had these stories, these experiences that I really wanted to share. So Preye Thot actually started as a website. And I just told little, like basically they were like journal entries. So, and then after a while, people kept saying, you should do a podcast. You should do a podcast. You should be able to do a podcast. And I was like, okay. So it's interesting because I hadn't, before I started Preye Thot, I had never really listened to a podcast. Like I had just started listening to the read. So I was super late. And it's so weird because I feel like the read almost became like my little therapy sessions because I was also going through a major depression that summer of 2017. But nonetheless, I did my first episode in September of 2017 with one of my mentors, Iso Harris. The great thing about being in PR is that I had a large Rolodex of people that I could talk to, whether it be editors. Shout out to a few of them. The other speakers today have been on my show. Gia Peppers, Sylvia. So yeah, that's how I started. It was real simple. And it was actually, what's furthermore interesting is that my roommate at the time also had a podcast called The Oprah Rose Show, which they still do. So she just put me in contact with her engineer, and the rest is kind of history, so to speak.
As often it is. So basically just do it, get in where you fit in, and get you under the wing of a Black woman is what we have. And I would say, I feel like my experience is a combo of all of y'all's. I was on terrestrial radio in the public media sphere on the not NPR, on the other left. So like NPR is left. I'm talking about the other left, fam. I was on the other left station, and it was a quote unquote youth produced social justice radio show. I was already a little bit older, but I'm just going to show up and be youth. And they literally was like, here's the studio. You are live to New York City for 1 hour. The red light means you're on. And I was like, wait, what? Y'all gonna leave us? And they did. And they left us there. I stayed for 7 years, and it set me up for learning how to do stuff on the fly, talking to people in real time, filling up a blank area of time and space. But I guess this all takes us to like the first thing. I think a lot of people hit me in my DMs and they're like, TK, can we talk about, how do I become a podcaster? And it's really about getting experience, accumulating experience. What are some ways y'all have gotten experience, whether it's conventional or unconventional?
I think for me, being in PR, my experience literally came just from literally hearing hundreds of interviews, both good, bad, and indifferent, so to speak. So for me, I always had my clients come back and be like, when an interviewer asked questions that were like completely off script, so to speak, those were the interviews that they always seemed to like the most. So for that was pretty my point of reference for Eat, Pray, Thought. And I think that's one thing me and Amber have done really well, is that we generally ask these really absurd, kind of crazy questions that you would never think of. Like, if your sex was a food, which food would it be? And like, that's a random ass question, but it gets you thinking like, I'm a cherry, I'm a strawberry. So really it just came from literally listening to hundreds of interviews with different clients.
Yeah, I'd say that, and also doing like, I think a lot of times people think like, oh, I'm not going to start until I have the right microphone or the right DAW to edit in, or the right lighting setup so that I can have a good video Zoom like attachment to like the stuff that I make. And really, like it's common sense. The only thing that is going to make you better is reps. The only thing that's going to make you better is chances to try to do something. And so take all of those excuses that you tell yourself. And I'm not saying that you have to share everything that you're making, but make as much stuff as you can, because the more chances that you get to try something, the less bad things that you're going to make. And you're going to make a lot of bad things. Like, you know what I mean? So the more chances that you have at making something, the better chances you have at making something good.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing as Josh. Just like, I was very, very lucky to have cut my teeth in audio at NPR. It was a great experience. But when I was trying to transition from doing, like radio show to actual podcasting, which is very different, like TK was saying, once you're live, and like if something goes wrong, I mean, it's very stressful. But like when I was trying to transition into podcasting, ironically, at that point in time at NPR, there wasn't a direct pathway for me to get there. And so the way I had to learn how to podcast, which is a different, medium, obviously similar, but like it's a different kind of world. I had to go off and start my own podcast, which, it did well in its own little pocket of the world. But like, really for me, it was more about like, okay, what does it mean to actually go from editing like 3-minute conversations to now a 45-minute conversation? Like each of those is its own art. And like playing around with music and like booking guests, and again, like prepping going into a conversation, like all of that is something that it was very important for me to learn when I was, trying to create my own show, which then helped once I actually was hired to, make podcasts. And so, at that point, I think I invested in like Hindenburg, which is like one of the more affordable like editing softwares, and like very stripped down compared to something like Pro Tools, and much cheaper compared to something like Pro Tools. And me and my friend would call each other. The audio quality was terrible, but at the end of the day, I still walked out of it with some audio files that I could cut up together. And that was really like the main way that was like a major building block, and like what kind of, I was able, when I did finally apply to a podcasting fellowship, like I was able to point to that to say, like, I can do more than just 2-minute or 3-minute conversations. Like I've actually edited longer conversations. So 1,000% what Josh said, like you really have to find resources and do it. And yeah, that's how you become better.
Yeah. Agreed on all counts. I would say making different things, trying to make different things. Also, like in a way, because you don't want to be typecast or stereotyped or whatever, like my approach was like, okay, well, I'm applying to this job at StoryCorps. They make these tiny stories. Can I take this 1 hour convo and shrink it to 3 minutes? Like do the opposite of what you were doing, Agi. And I was just like, okay, I did it. And I was like, do I really want to apply to this job even? Do I even want to do this? Because also it hurts my soul to leave all that beautiful audio on the floor, you know? But that's a whole nother situation. I definitely would say I was making mistakes on my own time and my own dime. You know, learning how to talk to people, learning how to book and do pre-interviews. I did all the mistakes on my own projects so that I wouldn't do them on other people's, you know, people that's paying me, or be upfront. I was definitely upfront with what I didn't know so that they can teach me and I could go after and like do work, like Agi said, after hours and stuff like that. Like it's really DIY. And then if someone is willing to be like, hey, do this for me, then do it, you know?
Yeah. And I think that even when you do find yourself in a situation where you are in a role where you get to make things, which is like super lucky, right? Or if you're making things for yourself, I think it's really important to like set mini goals with each thing that you're doing. So like, for example, like maybe with one project, you're like, you know, I really want to get better at sound design. This is where I'm going to like explore that. I really want to get way better at like the ping pong energy of an interview. Like this is where I'm going to focus on that. And that way you don't feel so overwhelmed by trying to do everything at once. Yeah. Like if you like isolate it down and focus on one thing project by project, it makes it a lot more manageable and less anxiety provoking.
I want to get into because I know folks are here for breaking into and they want some real tips and tricks and some actionable stuff. So like, I want to get into like honing your skills, sharpening that knife. You know, if it's tech or if it's storyline, do you have tips on that folks can walk away with, like how to do a thing? I would say, like a lot of y'all said earlier, in terms of just doing it and whether you have the best mic or not, I think when you have your tools, whatever the mic is, learn how to use it. I think a lot of people buy mics, they plug them into the side of the computer or whatever, their mixer or whatever. And then next thing you know, they like, why does it sound shitty? Well, I'm like, you talking into it backwards, sis. So I would implore y'all, the things that you purchase, learn how to use them. It's all on YouTube University, or ask a friend, phone a friend. And then also don't get scared by editing software. Use the free ones till you have money to pay for the, you know, the not free ones. Because it's just what's really real. Real talk, you're not going to get a job out the gate when you just showed up a month ago on the scene. So go ahead, learn, use the free stuff. And then someone will be like, oh, you did that on, you know, Brokeback Mountain Machine. Like it's, you know, it costs nothing. I was like, yeah, my shit sound pretty on this broke ass Audacity. But guess what? They'd be like, well, if you could do Audacity, then you could trick out in Pro Tools and Hindenburg. So people are willing to work with you if you give them something to work with. So I'm going to open up the floor to everybody else for some knife sharpening skills.
So I'm just going to be completely honest. I don't know how to work any type of editing software. I went straight to a studio. It was cheap.
Or pay a professional. Hello.
Like, I was like, I don't have time for this. I have a lot of things going on. This is not the thing I want to be worried about. I want to worry about how good the show is. So I think one thing for me that I would say is a tip is definitely like, talk about things that you are passionate about. I think so much of like when you go into podcasting, you're new, you want to recreate what you fell in love with or what made you even want to be a podcaster. But I think it's very important to really talk about the things that actually move your spirit, like the things that actually make you light up. You know, I love the word bussy. I use it every time. It's part of my show, like good bussy vibes. Bussy aspirations. Like I am passionate about bussy. I am passionate about dick. I am passionate about a lot of various things. And these are the things I discuss. So for me, it's important that like I said, I think it's very important that you discuss the things that you are actually passionate about and the things that really get you going. And dick always gets me going, like always.
Listen, you and me both, child. We out here. We have turned the page in this panel. Josh,
how do we even follow that? But no, Josh kind of touched on this, but like, you know, when that amazing, like, you know, when I had that amazing mentor, when I first started learning how to edit, like basically what she did was like the first time she sent me audio from her archive, it was just a single person's voice. So literally just learning how to, like, if I have an hour-long interview, how am I using my editorial judgment to like cut it down to, let's just start with like, you know, maybe like 30 minutes, like cutting it down halfway. Like, how am I trying to like build both my editorial skill and figuring out what makes the most sense to keep in, but also my technical skill. Just editing one person's voice is extremely easy. The next time she sent me audio, it was 2 people. So I was editing a conversation and trying to figure out, okay, how do I make these cuts so that, you know, I'm not accidentally only cutting the top track and the bottom track gets, you know, unsynced and it's just a nightmare, like trying to learn that. The next thing she sent me was a single person's voice, but there was music underneath it. So like a single track of music, what are ways I can learn how to weave it in between this person's voice and like hear what sounds good, what doesn't sound good, and kind of like use my ear really well to be like, okay, music doesn't fit right quite like right here, or like it sounds better here. But also like she would be giving me feedback along the way. So I mean, I think part of it is like building that out for yourself, like starting with really I don't know, just intentional, focused goals. Like you're not going to create This American Life episode your very first time sitting down at an editing software. So like really, you know, you can have This American Life goals or like, you know, very, you know, highly scored narrative type series goals. But like you always have to start somewhere. So just like remembering that. And yeah, like as you're like searching through trying to like build these reps, like definitely sharing it with like a friend. They don't even necessarily have to be a podcast professional. Cause I will say like, we will like edit each other to death and like really get so nitpicky and annoyingly so. And sometimes it's just like, okay, how is this going to land on like the average listener's ear? Like, and I mean, I don't mean average as disrespect, but literally just like someone who's not trying to get audio super, super perfect, like what is going to land for them. And then like also take the time to get an audio professional to listen to it, because they'll give you more of the technical tips and like, you know, building a narrative and like the editorial like ear, like they can definitely help you with that, which is definitely important. But I will say like having those 2 tracks of feedback is always super important to me, because, you know, first, sometimes you might not always have access to an audio professional. So until you do, I think it's totally okay to like send your edits to your friends and just be like, what do you think about this? Does anything here sound weird? And that'll definitely be helpful. But yeah, definitely like start with individual building blocks and then, you know, make it more complicated. It doesn't have to start complicated. Yeah.
And before we go to you, Josh, real quick, I just wanted to jump in and say, whether you're on the side of paying someone or the side of doing it yourself, you still have to know each position of the podcast, right? Each player's position, because Savoy has to communicate to the editor or the person what they want, right? And what this story should entail and where does this go? Because you leave a bunch of raw audio in somebody's hands that does not have your best interests in mind, does not have your show message in mind. I still have to communicate to them. So now learn the language of the media that you are trying to do. So either way, it's communication on all fronts. Thank you for letting me add that. Josh.
Yeah, for sure. And I just encourage everyone to pick an editing software and get to know it really well, because it really doesn't matter which one you're using, but being able to speak that language is really helpful, especially if you need to talk to an engineer and you're like, I want this cut, I want a music post here. Like being able to speak the same language is really helpful. I think my tip is it feels really like basic, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's really important to me. I think for me, one of the biggest hurdles to creating something is my own mind. Like I forget things a lot. And so I think that you come up with all of these ideas, and a lot of them are awful ideas, right? Like, and you have to self-edit, but sometimes every once in a while, you might come up with something that's good. And the worst thing that could happen is if you forget it. So what my tip would be is to figure out whatever form of archiving that you need to do in order to like be able to execute the ideas that you have. Like, I have this romantic idea. In fact, I have one right here. I have this romantic idea that I have these like leather bound books like all around where I live. If you open them, there's probably like 2 pages that have writing on them. Because I always just have this idea that like, if I have this beautiful book, I'll make beautiful things and I'll write, like, you know, but that's not a system that works for me. What the system that works for me is my phone. Like, I have notes in my notes app that go all the way back to like 2014 of just ideas of things that I want to build out, ways to like structure a story, like ways to think about scoring, like story ideas themselves. And so when I walk into a pitch meeting or when I'm trying to figure out what I want to do next, the first thing I do is I go through the list of things that I've been thinking about. And that's the like probably the thing that allows me to function the most, is having that bank of ideas to pull from when I feel tapped out, you know?
That's dope. I see some dope questions in the comment section, and I just want to encourage everybody that's watching to add more questions, because we're about to get to that part in like 8 minutes. But before we go there, I want to get into this conversation as I put my face close to the screen, this conversation of how is it different for us as Black creators, producers, hosts? How has the trajectory changed over time that y'all see? Let's just go there. You worked on another round, Aggie, so I'm gonna let you start.
Man, it's so crazy because I literally listened to that show in college, and then 2 years later I was working on it, which is like, still, I can't believe that happened. And it was a great experience. But what's crazy is that when another round and the read like really, really popped off back in like, you know, I know the read goes back further than this, but I feel like it was around like between like 2015 and 2017, we had like a moment, right? Where like, it wasn't just podcasting that was really, you know, being invested in as an industry, but like we were actually seeing a good amount of like Black hosts on like hosting these shows and the face of these shows. And unfortunately at that point, there weren't as many Black producers behind the scenes on those, some of those shows. But, you know, like it did feel like a moment where you could really, where we, I don't know, just thought we had a breakthrough, I guess. And as the industry, I think at that point in my head, I really was like, okay, podcasting is like a newer like medium and industry. So there's a chance here for them to not recreate a lot of the issues that existed in legacy media with like you basically just having it be whitewashed. Fast forward now like 4 or 5 years later, and Spotify is giving like millions of dollars to these white men to host shows. And I'm just like, where are we going here? And so I don't know. I feel like we had a moment of hope, and then it just got really hard again. And I think for me, like one of the most difficult things on like a day-to-day level has been when we pitch our ideas, it's not, you know, and this is like pitching a show idea or a segment idea, like when you're in these spaces that are still largely white led, you're not just having to make the case for why your idea is good, you're also having to translate it to white people who are essentially the majority stakeholders. Yep. That's a lot of emotional energy that like is really painful. Like, cause all we want is to be able to be ourselves and like have our ideas shine, because they're great ideas on their own. But it's like, you really have to take that extra amount of energy, that extra time in your workday to explain to them what this thing means before they can even decide if it's a good idea or not.
And that's why I love I don't want to call it a backlash, but I love the pushback.
Like the public pushback.
Yeah, the public pushback and even the behind the scenes pushback of like, hey, this show is not about teaching you about the things. You either identify or you don't. We all have grandmas. So me talking about my Black grandma should resonate with you just as hard. You talking about your Italian grandma. So like, let's not play this game. So like, that's happening now, but it's 2021.
Yeah, and I will say I do want to give credit to Code Switch, because I feel like this was back in 2016, maybe. They had that episode about the explanatory comma and how we need to do away with it. And like Code Switch is like one of the OGs at this point of like, you know, being just like a show that is largely led by like Black and brown people that is actually getting the investment it deserves. Because I also don't want to act like indie podcasters have not been doing it for years, but like we're talking about like, okay, who is getting actual money and resources to make these shows, and where is that money coming from? And like, there's all these questions, because one thing I always share with people who are trying to get into podcasting is like, you can't just focus on the creative. It's all fun and great, but like, you constantly have to pay attention with what's happening on the business side, because that really informs like basically the trajectory. I mean, if you're trying to do this professionally, that affects your trajectory. Even if you're not trying to be in the ad ops team, like knowing what is going on and where money is going, where it's coming from, etc. Like that, unfortunately, because we do live in a society run by capitalism, like you have to be paying attention to that. And it will tell you a lot. Like when you look at the numbers, like it tells you a lot about what a company stands for, and where you can fit in that space. So yeah, I mean, it unfortunately has been like something that has always followed me in my career at this point. But like I mentioned earlier, like my saving grace has been other Black producers in these spaces with me. And, you know, maybe we're not in the same space, but we still know of each other. Josh and I, obviously, we work at the same company currently. And we, you know, over the course of our friendship have really been able to relate and bond over a lot of these things that I don't know if I would still be in this industry at all if I didn't have those kinds of people in my life. So definitely try to connect with folks. I saw y'all doing that already in the chat. Like that made me very happy, because, you know, that's how we're gonna like push through, I think.
So Savoy, do you want to jump in? I think also when you talked about Bussy, yes, love it. Language, you know, I had a hard time getting folks to take me seriously because I used language. And I'm finding now, even though I ended my show so I could go get a full-time, nigga need benefits. I had to go and get my benefits, but I was using language before language was appropriate or possible. And what I found that not only did my white counterparts not take me seriously, my Black counterparts used that as a way to act like I wasn't credible enough, like I wasn't telling a story, like it was like pulling teeth to get my Black pod homies to listen to my work, because they too fell into this thing about how a show should sound. They drank the Kool-Aid too. So I wanted to ask you, Savoy, now as a person that uses language in the present, and not just blue language or raw talk, like just art, how we talk. Mm-hmm. How is that for you?
Honestly, I come into any space being my authentic self 99.9% of the time. So it hasn't been a problem for me. I think I also have been very intentional about the type of people that I invite on the show, the type of people that, you know, and same can be said for Amber, type of people that we just generally ask to be guests on the show. You know, we have to know that you truly are an ally, or you are truly just, you know, about that life, so to speak. So I haven't ran into a lot of those issues. You know, I think what has happened is because of the podcast, I've gone on other shows that have not necessarily been ready or prepared for the language that I use. But once again, I'm just still me. Like, and if that is an issue for you, then that's your issue, but I'm not going to take it on.
Thank you. I want to hear from Josh, and then we're going to get into these Q&As. And while Josh talks, I'm going to go get my charger because I have been an irresponsible host. My bad.
I think it's just like what Augie was saying, like in terms of Black creators, especially Black creators in like white spaces, which podcasting typically is, having to like translate themselves or validate the work that they do. I also feel like an extra pressure a lot of times in regards to the types of stories that we're allowed to tell. Like, it's like there's only certain types of stories, certain types of Black stories that are valid. And it's a pressure that I don't ever see white creators have to deal with. And so I really try to make sure that I'm intentionally being inclusive when I'm making things, but I also I want to make happy stuff, you know? Like, I want to make stuff that like centers joy. I want to make stuff that centers love. I want to make stuff that centers like all different aspects of the human experience. And I don't want to be pigeonholed into any sort of like storytelling tropes or areas. And I think that it's an active choice that you have to make to engage with the type of content that you want to see out in the world. And it's something that you just have to be aware of at all times, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, y'all, for this. I want to get into these questions here, and I'm gonna we don't have a lot of time, so I'm gonna probably pick like 3 of them that we haven't touched on yet. Let's see. I think this one is interesting because folks that don't come from media may not know, and we might not all get a chance to chime in. So whoever has the answer, y'all just jump in on this one. Do you pay guests that come on your show? Look at the heads, nod. I feel like that's a lightning round. No. Basically,
I actually have.
You have.
I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that. I have not necessarily paid, but I have offered like car service or something like that. Like, obviously I had Angelica Ross on the show, so I couldn't like, I'm gonna get you an Uber, Angelica, like you're Angelica Ross. Like, so I think, and then, you know, just sometimes like depending on the guest, like I have offered a stipend, so to speak, or a fee, but that's just because I think I'm understanding that just because you may have internet fame doesn't mean you actually have the funds that people may think you have. So at the very least, you've come on to help my show. So at the very least, I can buy you lunch, you know, and that's how I've looked at it. So I wouldn't necessarily even say it's been a fee, but it's more just like, thank you for looking out. It doesn't happen for everybody, but it has happened for sure. Yeah.
Another caveat to the no headshake I can think of is like if you're working on a branded show for a big corporation and you do like a big live event, there might be like a booking fee for each person. But like typically with like a weekly talk show, for example, like if you have guests on, like you might get them a car service or something like that, but I wouldn't pay them to it.
And I would say be mindful of what you're asking. So an interview, I'm not going to pay you for that, right? That's an interview we have in a jam. You can choose to come on or you cannot. But if I'm asking you to do additional labor, like explain to me your life's work and how that affects me as a Black, white, other person, then that's you asking them to produce a segment, pay them to produce that segment. And I want to jump into another pay thing. Savoy, and then Aggie and Josh and myself, we are professionals that get paid to do this, and Savoy pays people like us to do stuff. So I'm very curious, how do you connect with a person to pay them? How do you connect and pay a professional, and how much is a fair rate?
I know that there are lots of resources online, like Air Media, for example, like has like a huge list full of like what the industry standard like day rate is for an engineer or a producer, or like if you're doing a tape sync, which is like when you're doing an interview with someone and they're not in the same place as you and you need to send somebody with a microphone to them so that you can put both audio tracks together in post. There's rates for that as well. And so I would definitely look at the like Air Media is a good resource. Look at those sheets online. Thanks, Augie.
Savoy, what about you? How did you find your person?
Really a recommendation. So, like I said, my roommate at the time also had a podcast. She suggested, and I got the homie discount. So the homie discount is always good, but also I think a huge part of like keeping my costs low have just been literally networking with my friends, and really bringing them on, so to speak, to be a bigger part of the show. Because I think sometimes even when you say payment, even if you don't necessarily have payment, but if you have a way to bring them into your space and really give them a way to share their stories, it's almost kind of like a form of payment. You know, I think bargaining is always going to be key. But yeah. I've
definitely bargained services. You know, I might need a sound designer and today I need, they need an editor or whatever. Like, you get in where you fit in, but in terms of finding out those fair rates, talk to people in the field, because you don't want to inadvertently lowball someone, especially in these times. And then as we look to each other to help each other, try to make your first stop paying someone, and then find out what can I do for you? What do I have for you? Because also we tend to undervalue ourselves, which leads us to undervalue other people, to undervalue us. So what happened was, let's jump into, so I guess with this, how do you, folks are worried about being canceled. And we talked about, talking in our language and whatnot. Are you guys ever worried about being canceled? And how would you tell someone to, how do you provide a safe space for your listeners to have an opinion, as well as sharing your own opinion yourself? Like, you don't necessarily have to agree with them, but you also want to be a safe space for folks. What's the balance there?
Honestly, I think part of it is just understanding that, like, you have to live in your truth and you have to express your truth. And I think one thing that Ypres Thought has done for me in general is help me just learn the stories of everyone and understand that I don't have the right to tell their story. You know what I'm saying? So I think for me, like, every guest is an educational process. Like, I want to know what your experiences are, and I want you to tell your story in the way you want to tell it. And I think, obviously you're going to have guests. I had a few, me and Amber have had a few guests that have maybe been problematic, or certain statements have been problematic, but I think we've never gotten canceled, or we've never had those moments, because I think we're authentic about, look, these are our thoughts and opinions, and the opinions of the guests are very separate. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Here's another one. This one is about getting sponsorship, marketing your podcast. I guess I want to add both of those questions together and just say, what are some benchmarks that we should be like looking for before we go seek sponsorships? Like, what is there a magic number we need to pass in terms of listens or downloads? And then maybe if anyone has any tips on like what's worked for you marketing wise.
One thing that made me really happy looking in the chat was folks asking sharing what podcasts they work on, and like saying they want to connect and all of that, because first and foremost, and the free way to market your podcast is literally by cross promotion with people who have podcasts. Literally, even in the current job I'm in, where we have the money and, marketing teams and all of that to like make our show pop, every meeting we have about marketing still leads with where can we cross promote. And so, you can, and yeah, like that creates opportunities to collaborate in all these different kind of ways. So yeah, I would like literally the first thing I would do before you even think about like, oh, I need to have this many listens, is just like, hitting up a friend or just connecting with someone else who has a podcast and seeing how you can, make it work for each other. And then, I'll let someone else take the actual sponsorship question or like benchmark listens. I feel like it changes every year or something.
It really does. And I think you'll drive yourself crazy, so.
Because there really isn't a, like, I will say though, like, do check in with yourself at like every 6 months, and or even every quarter, like whatever makes sense for you, like check in with what's working and what's not working with your show, and like where you see, little spikes in listens. I think that just knowing your show and really truly knowing your audience, I think will help you lead the way in what makes sense. Because money's great and everything, but even with sponsorships, like when you can get to this point, like trying to be as picky as possible with what you're advertising, because you also don't want your listeners to be put off by something you're putting in your show. So I would just, be, and thankfully though, now there are like platforms that you can use to help track ads and things like that. But thinking about really growing and learning your audience first, I think a lot of the sponsorship comes naturally once you're able to like have that steady base.
We're starting to get to the last couple minutes, and I want to do my best here to get us all in. What advice would you give to creators that live and work outside of traditional media markets, New York, LA? I want to throw to Josh because I haven't heard from you in a minute.
Honestly, right now is probably the best time that I can think of, because usually power was so concentrated on these coastal cities. It was like you were in LA, New York, maybe Atlanta, but right now, for example, we're about to release the next season of Back Issue, and on July 26th, ding, and none of us are on the same coast. Like, some of us are in LA, some of us are in New York, and some of us are in the middle of the country. Some people are in like Chicago, and we found a way to make it work. We found a way to make it work. So I think that honestly, take advantage of the moment right now, because not everyone is back in an office yet. A lot of places, especially media places, are still at least partially working from home, like in a hybrid style, or like working from home completely. And so right now might be your moment to like try to jump in,
Yeah. I feel like, we're all broadcasting from our homes at the moment. So there's that. And currently I work for a company that's in Texas, and I'm in New York, and they hired me anyway, So there's that. And this person, shout out to this person. One thing I'm going to just go around the room. This is going to be the lightning bolt last one before the real last one. As a freelance producer, what are the most important skills I can build to be competitive? Everybody gets one thing to add to the thing. So, Savoy, your mic is off. Go. What is one thing that a producer can skill to be competitive?
Wow. Be personable. Like, I think sometimes producers are just like, can be very awkward. A lot of behind the scenes people can be awkward, and that's the thing. So if you can engage people and feel a little more friendly, I think that's always helpful.
Personable. Aggie.
Thank you. Let me
I was just going to say, be very organized and concise with what you can do. So like, if you have an example, like a file or a link you can share of you doing a tape sync, of you editing your own conversation, of you like having written a script somewhere, have that hyperlinked / even in your signature area, like having all of that there, because sometimes you might reach out for someone for one kind of job, but then they actually need an opening for something else, but they can see very quickly that you have done that thing too. And so like literally in like the signature portion of your email, if you just have like direct links / Dropbox links, whatever it is, to what you've done, and be clear about the different parts of production you've done before, that I think is super important.
Josh.
I mean, I really think that you should try to figure out, I mean, to be a freelance producer, right? I really think that you need to pick an editing software and just get really comfortable. Like, and it really doesn't matter which one it is. It doesn't matter the price point. It's not the knife, it's the chef. Like, that's real, real. But people, when you're looking for jobs, people are busy. They're also impatient. They're also lazy. And so you need to make it as easy as you can to be able to communicate your point of view or like the work that you're doing. And so the more comfortable that you are in one piece of editing software and able to put together like an interview or like scoring, the better, and the better that you're able to put that together so that you can hook somebody when you're trying to ask about a job, the better off you're going to be, I think.
Yeah. And I'll add, study whatever it is that you're doing at the moment. You know, when I was on Thursday Kit, I was studying. They like talk about men. I studied these men. I studied them up and I studied them down. I went to work at the tech company. I don't know nothing about nothing, let me tell you. But I went and studied these computers, y'all. Studied these computers, and then realized that you have a skill that doesn't matter what genre the show is, because at the end, if you end up making a show that you can understand from a point of view that like you did not have this knowledge before, right? If I understand it and I have told it in an entertaining way, then this skill is transferable. So don't let anyone try to be like, well, you seem to like, I would get these weird comments like, well, you do important work. That's code for black shit, right? You know, real talk. I'd be like, yo, fam, just put me on the fiction show. I cut tape. Like, so just know that don't allow yourself to be pigeonholed. I just gave y'all 3 in 1, y'all, but let me move to the last one, because this is, I'm getting turned. What are you working on now, and what do you see for the future of Black podcasting?
I am in like super high production on the next season of Back Issue. It's the show that I host with Tracy Clayton. And it's a show about nostalgia and all the like pop culture moments that you think you remember, but you don't. We are launching on the 26th of July this month, and I think our trailer is going to be out next week, so look out for that. Oh, and then the second part of your question was
yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's what Back Issue represents to me, is like being able to sit in things that feel good. Like, I think it's really important to be politically aware and to understand what's happening socially. Like, all of those are things that we have to do as Black individuals, like in America, just because we are Black individuals in America. But I think that like a lot of times we don't give ourselves the luxury of giving ourselves the space to have fun, because like fun has no sort of value within a capitalist society, you know? So I hope that we continue to hear a lot more like stories about Black people, about like, you know, about their joy and them succeeding and getting their goals, and the influence that we have and the beauty that we have and all of those sorts of things.
Amen. Thank you. Agi, Savoy.
So it's what I'm working on and what I want to see next.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm working on Okay Now Listen. It's a Strong Black Lead Netflix collab that is hosted by Silvio Bell and Scotty Beam. So definitely subscribe to that. Also working on the 3rd season of Going Through It, hosted by Jenny Yang, which will come out in the fall, I hope. And then there's one more show. I hate to be this person. I can't actually talk about it, but it's coming out in October, and it centers an amazing Black woman that everyone knows. And I'm very looking forward to that show coming out. Just follow Pineapple's socials for more details on that. And then what I want to see next is, just like more opportunities to, like, we have not run out of stories to tell, and just more of us being in positions of power to be able to like uplift like more Black storytellers and creators. On a personal level, I'm really trying to pivot into creating content for kids and like audio content for kids to bring them into the audio space as well. So if you are out there and also, you know, like making cute things for, you know, Black kids, like hit me up. I'm definitely looking to like learn from other folks who are already doing it and everything like that. So yeah, that's what's next for me.
Thank you. Savoy, what are you working on and what do you want to see in the space?
Finishing up season 4 of the Eat Pray Die podcast. We had a unexpected and very long extended break, but we are coming back very, very soon. So I think I'm just very excited just to kind of had to take a personal break and just get myself together, so to speak. So I'm excited to kind of just share what this last 6 months of my journey has been. So next month we're coming back. And then I think in general, I just want to see more out of the box content. You know, I think there are some variety of different ways you can tell stories. And I think I just want to see more and more people kind of explore how to tell a story, but tell it in like 20 different ways. But it all be entertaining or have a different, I guess, listening value to it.
Yeah. And thank you so much, y'all. I'm TK, and I'm working on a show right now with Headspace called Hibernation, and it's just about sleep and the thing that connects us that we all do at night that sometimes we don't talk about. So it's out right now, and I'm about to go send some notes over for like the next episode. Like, listen, I'm getting off the phone to work after this, and what I want to see in the space is, yeah, man, more lifting as we climb. I mean, we do it. We go to a party and we're talking folks up. We go to an event and we do it. I also on the flip side of that, I would love us to have grace for that person, because for each of us that are on the screen right now, there's 20, 30 of y'all in the DM or the inbox. So I just would appreciate grace for that. And if you are part of the majority community, know that we are busy helping our community, so we might not get to your inquiry, and you have a bunch of homies and colleagues that could go answer that question for you, as well as assets and resources and the head start of who you are. So on that note, I would like to thank our guests, Savoy, Aggie, Josh, and on behalf of all of us, we thank you, Black in Media, for having us to talk about breaking into podcasting today. Thank you so much, Trey, Brianna, and the team. Oh, wait, you're muted. Yep.
I got a little comfortable. All right. Y'all were doing so good. Y'all did an amazing job. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Their information, all the panelists' information is in the bottom under the video. So it's like a little module situation. You can add them there, reach out, take advantage of this. Again, this is being recorded, so we'll post it so that you can rewatch it. And yes, this was amazing. And I really appreciate y'all taking part in Black in Media Day, and happy Black in Media Day to everybody.
Thank you, Trey.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.